What are we waiting for, America? Are we truly afraid if we say nice things to people that their egos are going to get so big they can't? I've had guys say that, well, you got to be careful, you know, if you give too much praise, oh my God, people will get all exaggerated who they are. Raise your hand if you got too much positive reinforcement where you worked last year. Would you put your hand up real high? But you have to ask yourself, why do I do this? And I think I have the answer for that. You do it because of Billy Hawkins. You do it because of Billy Hawkins. Well, a natural question would be, who is Billy Hawkins? Well, you'll find out right now. I was a brand new principal at Kent Roosevelt High School, and I loved that community. I was so enthused about Kent, Ohio, and I knew nothing else. I'd never been an educator anywhere else, been an elementary teacher and high school teacher. Now I was principal, and I was quite young, and I was just so excited, Dave, about the opportunity. And I'd like to share my first day with you. I'll never forget this day. I got there real early. When you anticipate something you can't wait for, do you ever do that? I get up way early, and I got there early. There wasn't a kid around. I thought, you goof, what are you doing here so early? Nobody's around. And pretty soon the place began to fill up with kids. We had a place at Roosevelt High School called the Atrium. The Atrium is where the kids would assemble before school. And you could get a pulse in the school that quick when you went out there. You know what I'm talking about? You interact with the kids, you had a feel for the day. This is my first day out there, and I just can't wait. And I walk out, and in this sea of 1,400 to 1,500 kids, there were about 1,000 there that morning already before school. First day, all of us having first day jitters, the new principal and the new 10th graders. And as I walked out into that group, I've got to tell you something that I do not have an answer for. A kid's name popped into my mind. I looked around there and I thought, I wonder where Billy Hawkins is. I heard he was a fine athlete at the junior high, excellent football player, and just a super young man, but I'd never met him. And for some reason, his name fixed on my head, and I looked there in the sea of humanity, and I couldn't pick him out. And I had this image of a big, strapping kid, because he was a good football player. I thought, I bet he's a big stud. I could just see him there, you know, big, tough dude. Well, I couldn't pick him, so I went over to a young man in the 10th grade class that I did know. His name was Greg Boykin, and Greg Boykin and I had known him in the junior high, and I said, Greg, where's Billy Hawkins? He said, Mr. Neal, don't you know Billy? That's Billy over there. I looked over, and there was Billy Hawkins. And I thought, well, son of a gun. He was about 5'5", maybe 135 pounds as a 15-year-old. He didn't fit the image I had in all of mine. And Dave, I walked over to him like this. I put my hand out. I guess you're good. And he grabbed it just firmly like that. Billy Hawkins grabbed my hand as I grabbed him, and I want to tell you what happened. I'll never forget it. I never will forget it. This is why you keep doing what you're doing. I said, Billy, I'm Mike Neal, principal at Roosevelt High School, and I want to welcome you to Roosevelt. I hope you have a neat experience here. Put his shoulders back, looked up in my eyes, held onto my hand with a firm grip, said, I'm Billy Hawkins, 15-year-old sophomore, Roosevelt High School. Very proud to meet you, sir. Hope you have a good year. If I can ever be of help, let me know. I thought, who is the principal here? I was taken by him. He captured me by the heart about 2 minutes after I met him. And then I said to him the ultimate compliment. I try to live what I talk about, and I said to him, Billy, I understand you're a pretty fair football player. Pretty fair, sir. Pretty fair? I'm very, very good. There was no egotisticalness about it all. It was a matter of fact that like the east, the sun rises there, and in the west it sets. I'm a good football player. Pretty fair. I'd insulted him trying to compliment him. And I said, well, Billy, gee, that's great. I bet you plan to play some JV ball. I understand in Kent Roosevelt, at that time, we had 5 kids who ended up in the NFL from one class. And I can name some of them for you. Mike Adamley, who does sports on television today. Stan White, who played with the Lions at the end of his career. I could name a lot of them. They were all at that time in college, but it was an astounding, successful class. It's an astounding program in athletics as well as academics. I'm very proud of that high school, and I still am. So I say to him, I bet you plan to play some pretty serious JV ball, meaning I think he'll probably start on the JV. He looks at me with a degree of astonishment. Says, JV ball, sir? I plan to start on the varsity. Bang! I'm thinking, ooh, do I need to get this kid to the counselor's office real fast? He is really in for a rude awakening. So I persevere. I think, man, I haven't hit it right with this kid yet. I said, well, Billy, I bet you plan to play some defense, don't you? He said, yes, sir. Finally got one answer right, you know? He said, I do plan to play strong safety, sir. And he said, I'll also, of course, be the starting quarterback, sir. Boom. I was going to play both ways, all 5'5", 135 pounds of them in a large high school where we got people walking around that looked like trees. I said, well, Billy, that's great. I want to wish you a lot of luck. I just really mean it, and I'm smiling at him and thinking in my mind, wow, and I mean this sincerely at this point, I'm thinking, is he in for a rude awakening? But man, what confidence, what's inspiration, what belief. I shook his hand, wished him well, and stepped away, and he said, called out to me, Mr. Neal. And I turned and I said, yes, Billy. He said, Billy, he said, Mr. Neal, he said, I just want to tell you one thing. He said, we're going to be very good this year, sir. He said, you're going to come Friday night, aren't you? I said, well, Billy, I wouldn't miss it. My wife will be there, my children will be there. Yes, sir. Then he went on and articulated to me why he thought that we'd be good. He had a sense of confidence, and he spoke of it. He talked about the players on the team, and I knew he'd talk to them, too. Well, I walked away, and I took about 5 steps, and I walked into a gentleman by the name of Tom Campana, who is the athletic director and football coach. He's a legend in Ohio. I shouldn't tell you this, but his son, Tom Jr., beat Michigan in 1971 on the only score of the game. That's a reality. They were a great athletic family. I went up to Tom and I said, Tom, I just met the darndest 15-year-old I've ever met. He said, oh, you met Billy Hawkins. There are only 500 of them, and he knows him. I said, yeah, that kid got me by the heart. I said, I've never seen such confidence. There's no arrogance about it. He radiates a sense of confidence. It's special. He said, Mike, let me tell you about Billy. He said, don't be offended by this, but Billy's probably the finest natural leader I've ever met. I'm the principal, and he just told me that. That kind of hurt my ego a little bit. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, he's something else. I said, well, he must be able to do some special things for you to say that. He said, he really does. And I said, well, Tom, let me tell you what he just said, though. He said, what's that? I said, he just told me that he's going to start Friday night. He said, what? I said, yeah, he thinks he's going to be on the varsity, not JV ball. He's going to play on the varsity. Did he say that to you? I said, that's how I interpret what he said. I think that's what he meant, that yeah. He said, Mike, you know better than that. He said, I don't start sophomores on the varsity. I said, never done it. He said, be breaking precedent. But he said, let me tell you one thing. He said, I'm not starting, but he'll probably be in the game in a minute or two, both ways. For those of you who don't like football, this really isn't a football story. It's a story about you, and you'll see that in a minute. I said, Tom, he must be able to run like a deer. He's little. No, Mike, he said, he's not real fast. He's got decent speed, but not great speed. I said, well, he must have an arm like a cannon. You're talking about him playing quarterback. And no, he said he doesn't throw real great. Doesn't throw real great. I said, oh, he doesn't run real fast. He doesn't throw real great, and he's small. I said, this is going to be a heck of a season, I can see. He said, no, Mike, we'll be very good, and Billy will make a real contribution. He said, Billy's special. I said, well, Tom, I'll be there Friday night. And I went Friday night. I'd like to tell you about Friday night. Went Friday night, and we were getting drilled. I mean, really drilled. It was close to the half. We're not used to getting drilled. We had a great program. I turned to my wife, Patty, and I said, honey, do you remember that kid I told you that I met the other day, who really captured my heart? I said, oh, Billy Hawkins. She said, yes, I remember. And I said, well, you know, Tom said he was going to play, and I said, here we are way behind. He hasn't gotten it down. And my wife's very empathetic. She said, oh, he must be crushed. I said, yeah, he must be. And I said, well, the way we're playing, you know, I don't know why he couldn't play. The half was over. In the third quarter, outran number 14. He was so small at that point in his life that his shoulder pads were a little bigger than he was, and he kind of ran on a slant. They put him at strong safety, where they had been running unrelentlessly and just going right over the top of us. And on the first down, as they snapped the ball, we noticed that number 14 got in and tackled this big tailback, and the kid went down with a thump. And he got up and looked kind of indignantly at this little guy who just knocked him down. And the people in the stands said, geez, that little guy got in there and tripped that big guy. So they ran a second play in the same position on the field because they knew that it had been a mistake. And the guy went down again. And they brought it a third time. And we looked up at the scoreboard and it said 4th down and 11. They hadn't gained a yard. They'd lost one in 3 series. And that little guy was sticking people a lot bigger than him. He had a spirit, a belief. He was special. Well, let me tell you what happened. They punted the ball and they put in a new quarterback. When we went on offense, outran number 14. Now I was at quarterback. He was directing the team, and you know what happened? He would go into the huddle, and he would talk to the kids. I don't know what he was saying. There wasn't much time in a huddle, but they come out and they played differently. They were a whole different group. They were inspired. They knew what leadership they had in front of them. And when they got to the line, those 17 and 18-year-olds played like a whole different group of people. They looked up to that 15-year-old. Do you remember when you were 15? Did you have people looking up to you that were 18? It's a rare commodity, especially when they're little. Well, let me tell you what happened, folks. We went up and down the field and we pulled the game out. It was an amazing display of leadership. It was a display of all kinds of things that I don't even understand yet to this day, really. I was euphoric. I couldn't wait to go tell Billy how impressed I was, and deep in my heart to say, you know, you had more faith than I did. And I was embarrassed by myself because I'm a believer in people, and size has nothing to do with spirit, capacity, the ability to inspire. But I couldn't find him on Monday when I looked for him, and I couldn't find him on Tuesday, and I couldn't find him on Wednesday, and finally I'm thinking, where the devil is Billy? And I went over to the guidance office and I said, where's Billy Hawkins? And they said, didn't you know? I said, didn't I know what? Well, Billy's in special ed. He's retarded. He's in a pull-out program. He doesn't in the regular classes. He's in some, but he's in mostly special ed courses. You've probably been, and I said, what did you say? Would you run that by me again? And they ran it by me again, and I said, have you ever seen him with his peers? Have you ever witnessed his ability to lead and inspire others? Retarded? Wow, that's heavy for me to accept. I walked out of the office and I was numb. I'm telling you, I was numb. My mind was swimming. I'm an advocate of special ed, but I happen to believe we've got to constantly look at kids, reassess where we are, make sure we're serving kids where they need to be. Here's what happened. I walked out of there and went home that night and talked to my wife about this, shared that thought with her. The next morning I went to my faculty and I said, could it be we've made an error, that we've relocated a kid or placed a kid that needs to be relocated? And they said, hey, we're willing. I called his mother, who I did not realize was his mother until I got her on the phone. It's one of those things where you know one person and you know, I'd known her for years, didn't know that this was Billy's mom. She had a different last name at that time. Her name was Boykin. I called her and I said, I'd like to pull Billy out of special ed classes and put him in straight college preparatory courses, and I don't know if it's right or not. She interrupted me. I'll never forget it as long as I live. What a powerful lady, wonderful lady. She looked at me and she said, Mr. Neal, I don't know much about education, but I do know one thing. Billy's the most important thing in my life, as each of my children are. You do right by him. You do right by him. I'll remember that finger as long as I live. I got in the car and I didn't know if I was doing right by him, and the next morning I called him in. I said, Billy, we're going to take you out of special ed classes, move you into straight classes, and he interrupted me. He said, I can do it, Mr. Neal. I can do it. I've just been waiting for the opportunity. And I said, now, Billy, wait a minute. This isn't irrevocable. Can you imagine that, telling a kid who's struggling in school using the word irrevocable? I thought that many times. Talk about who was really having difficulty thinking straight. It was me. I said, what I mean by that, Billy, is it can be changed. We can go back and make an adjustment, and if it doesn't work, he said, it'll work, Mr. Neal, it'll work. You just watch it work. Oh, did it work? That faculty busted their butts, folks. They spent extra hours, extra periods. They had a lot of catching up to do, and so did Billy, because, of course, he gives the same commitment to everything he does. It's total excellence. What an outcome. He graduated with honors from Roosevelt High School, got a full scholarship right here to Big Rapids, Michigan, Ferris State. He was our captain in football and our captain in basketball when he graduated, and he was my unofficial assistant principal. There is no question. Astounding, but that isn't even the end of the story. He went to Ferris State, and my wife and I went to see him play his first game. We sat in the stands, and I turned to my wife at half, and I said, they don't play freshmen. What are we doing up here? And they were getting drilled. Yeah, you guessed it. The second half, they put a new quarterback in. Well, he wasn't 5'5" and 135 anymore. He was 5'6" and 145. But he was a piece of steel because he worked hard and he inspired them, and they played differently, altogether differently. He went on to become the youngest captain in the history of Ferris State. The next year he was captain as a sophomore. That doesn't happen. Graduated with honors from Ferris State University, where he met his wonderful wife. I have trouble with this part of the story because it's always so special to me. When he graduated with those honors, he went to, Lansing High School and became the youngest head football coach in the history of the state of Michigan at age 21, now affecting the lives of kids like his had been affected by that great faculty who was willing to look again and make another commitment to a very special person. But that isn't the end of the story. I got a call 6 years ago on a Saturday night, maybe 7 now. And on the other end of the line came this name, this voice. It's always the same. Mr. Neal, this is Billy. I said, Billy, how are you? He says, I'm great, but I wish you could have been here today. And I said, Billy, if there's any way, but it's so far. I was in Colorado Springs at the time. He said, well, if you just could have been there, it would have been a special treat. I just wanted you to know, and I wish all the faculty at Roosevelt could know, I got my PhD today from Michigan State University. But that's not the end of the story. I got a call 3.5 years ago when I started this consulting, and I'd gone through some health problems and found out I had cancer, and I was really struggling. And my wife wanted to get closer to our children, and there was a real need for me to provide that security in her life at that point. Who lived in Lincoln, the kids were there, they were young adults. So we moved back, and I was going through that, and I'm fine. My health is excellent, thank God. But I got a call on August 1st. I can tell you the day. On the end of the line came this voice. Mr. Neal, this is Billy. I said, Billy, how are you? He said, I'm fine, but I'm worried about you. He said, how are you doing? I said, I'm fine. He said, well, the real reason I called you is this, sir. He said, I know you're going to be okay. But he said, I just want to share one thing with you. I am now the Associate Dean of the College of Education at Ferris State University. I'd like to hire you as a consultant. Would you come up here and work for me? Isn't it strange that princes and kings and clowns that caper in sawdust strings and common people like you and me are truly builders for eternity? Each is given a book of rules, a shapeless mass, and a bag of tools. And each must build their life as flown, either a stumbling block or a stepping stone. Keep building those great stepping stones. God bless you. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you. I'd like to close this off with one very special thought at this point, and this is a real thrill for me. I'd like to introduce Billy Hawkins to you. I'd like to have him stand up.
Hi, I'm Billy Hawkins. There's someone in your classroom just like me. Keep looking for me.